Hello, it's May the 1st, 2022, I think, and here we're still going through the book on Discovery of Spiritual Type. And we are going to be talking today about the spirituality wheel and a bit of overview, but also questions for the congregation. Does the congregation have a spirituality? And we are going to be talking about that today and going through a few questions for you to answer on your own. Because something many people don't think about is that can a congregation have its own spirituality, its own unique, distinct spirituality? And the answer is absolutely. Have you ever been to a church where you just did not feel comfortable? What was coming from the pulpit or coming from the music, the singing, whatever, just was not speaking to you? It's because you were not connecting with that congregation's spirituality. And that's okay. Each community is different, has their own sense of how God is expressed through them and in them. So each congregation, each faith community has its own unique spirituality. Because when we start thinking about or talking about corporate spirituality, it's called, the first question she asks is this: how do our members see this church? For example, when you leave church, what do you find valuable? Was it something that you're able to think about, gave you a new thought, a new understanding, a new perception? Or was it something you felt, something that moved you or brought to you emotional response to what you experienced in worship? How did you feel, or what did you think? What was your experience in worship as you are leaving? And of course, not everyone is going to experience church the same way, but it's more like a common understanding. The corporate spirituality is a term we used before, but a common sense of how you experience God, or in worship, how you experience worship. What do you come out thinking or feeling? The next question she asks is, how can we provide enriched experiences for those whose needs are not being met? And that's an important question, especially when we start thinking about the diversity of spirituality within our community. Sometimes people's needs aren't being met, and how do we include that within the worship experience for us to be a family of fairly diverse people, and those who are experience God in a multitude of ways, but still come together with the same common experience. The next question she asks is, what is our church doing right? How are people growing in their faith? How are they growing in their relationship with God, if we want to use that language within their own spirituality? How are they growing as a follower of Jesus? How are they connecting? How are they becoming a stronger part of our community? How is the worship life of our congregation helping people grow into who God has created them to be? So I think that's a really fundamental and important question for us to ask, because we are doing something right for a lot of people. Identifying that is really important. And this final question she asks about corporate spirituality, it's a really interesting one that I find. In what ways does our church differ from other types of spiritual expression? You notice she doesn't say other types of Christianity or other types of even Lutheranism. She says other types of spiritual expression. And I think this is a very important question for us to consider, mainly because it helps us create and find our own identity as a community. Because we are different from a lot of other spiritual expressions, especially within Christianity, and even more especially within Lutheranism. We don't follow the Lutheran liturgy. We have praise music and that sort of stuff. We're very informal. However, my sermons, for example, are fairly heady, academic. I recognize that, which is not true for a lot of other churches who have the same kind of worship style. So we do have this kind of really interesting mix of spiritual expressions, ways of looking at God, experiencing God, talking about God, or even our own experience in worship. So these are some questions for us to consider as we go through this process as individuals and as a congregation, as we explore our own corporate spirituality within our own spirituality. And on Wednesday, I'll be coming up with some individual questions for you to consider in talking about your own individual spirituality.